Hello, welcome to the Dr. Data Show. This is Eric Siegel with my co-host, Luba Gloukhova.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! We're here to present the new paper authored by Yann LeCun and others, AI Must Embrace Specialization via Superhuman Adaptable Intelligence. Breaking news, we just dropped our first joint co-hosted podcast episode 2 days ago, and just yesterday one of the co-authors on this paper responded and said, hey, did you check out our paper? Because last episode we were addressing the artificial general intelligence eternal debacle of conflicting and evolving definitions and the problems with the whole concept depending on how you define it. And he piped in and he said, we just dropped this paper, I guess just the end of last month, late February. What do you think of it? And I had a little dialogue with him a little bit already on Twitter. So I'll just tell you all of the authors. So they're espousing in this paper, hey, let's not go with this whole AGI concept, however you may define it. Let's instead pivot the industry and focus on, as a goal, as a North Star, superhuman adaptable intelligence. And they define that. Luba and I shall explore that definition, dissect it, and give our thoughts. So this paper is written by Duda Goldfeder at Columbia, Philippe Wyder, who's at Distill AI, but pretty recently, a couple of years ago, got his PhD at Columbia, which is where I got my PhD some number of decades ago in the computer science department. He was in the mechanical engineering department, has a career that seems to focus somewhat, or at least historically, on robotics. Third author is Yann LeCun, of course, at NYU, and then the fourth and final author is Ravid Schwartz-Ziv, also at Columbia. So you got kind of three Columbia affiliated or previously affiliated, and Yann LeCun. So I don't see this as a group of people involved with Yann's new startup, I guess. I think it's really just more of pure academic or vendor neutral kind of endeavor. I think it's a great paper. I think there's still issues with using the word intelligence. That'll be sort of the main question that I leave with. But we've got a lot to talk about. Luba, what's your overall thought before we kind of read off the definition and the points of this paper?
I thought this paper was extremely exciting and refreshing, and I really resonated with some of the ideas here. And at the same time, that has enough novelty for me to completely reconsider some previously held beliefs.
Oh, so it actually not only did it satisfy I think a craving that you share with me of kind of setting the world straight and setting it in the right direction, or a meaningful direction,
yes,
a helpful direction, but it also contributed new thoughts and ideas. I'd say the same thing as well.
Yeah.
So Philippe Wyder, the second author there, is the one that reached out to us out of the blue after on Twitter after our pod from 2 days ago dropped. He's applied AI researcher at Distill AI. As I mentioned, got his PhD at Columbia, but I don't know him. I haven't met any of these four authors directly myself. And he said how timely. We just published a paper that shows a path of our muddled AGI, a path out of our muddled AGI discourse by embracing specialization. That's very much what they espouse in this paper, with the word adaptable, superhuman adaptable intelligence, SAI, superhuman adaptable intelligence. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about it. And I wrote back to him on Twitter what I had also messaged you, Luba, yesterday, kind of as I finished reading the paper. Finally, a truly thoughtful and greatly informed take on how we might better define and steer AI as a field, because it did feel like a breath of fresh air to me. The vast majority of content out there about where AI could go, especially when you invoke the term AGI, I feel is conveying over-promising about what's possible. So it's a problem, right? And it's hard to take down the problem without sounding negative and critical, but this is sort of saying, hey, well, look, here are some actually more feasible goals, and it breaks it down in terms of the definition. I then asked him a couple kind of clarification questions about how they define superhuman adaptable intelligence, and he responded, but they were just kind of clarifications. So let's read off the definition. Superhuman adaptable intelligence it's basically just two parts. Capable of, one, adapting to exceed humans at any task humans can do. So that's not the same thing as saying that it's one singular general intelligence or system that's capable of everything a human can do, but rather it's a system or a technology or approach that has the capacity to adapt to any particular task. So it's one task at a time. So it's basically narrow AI over and over again, one way or another. But they definitely espouse general tools, world models. They use that word, continued work with self-supervised learning, which is really what Gen AI is. And then the second part of the definition is that it can adapt to tasks outside the human domain that have utility. So in other words, it's not only about being able to do what people can do, which is sort of the hang-up of AGI in a sense, right? Artificial general intelligence, if it's capable of anything a human can do, then you're defining the goal, the objective, the set of capabilities in terms of human capabilities. So now that I've read off the definition, any particular thoughts?
Well, for me, I guess the biggest earth-shattering idea is that, according to the authors of the paper, human intelligence is not general. That for me was really mind-blowing. I always thought whenever there's some sort of novel idea or some sort of creative process going on, it's some sort of bridging of intelligences from different fields, or synapses forming across different parts of the brain responsible for different activities, and it's something that sort of makes it bigger than the sum of its parts. And this made me realize that maybe it's something completely different, where these novel ideas and discoveries or creation actually happens when we really focus and zero in and specialize, as opposed to broaden our perspective. We don't really know what's going on.
In our own heads.
In our own heads, exactly. I mean, we're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, so in that way, this paper represents yet another move, and I think one that'll gain some traction, at least. I mean, it's a fool's errand to prescribe a new buzzword. You never know what's going to really take off, but they've certainly given it the old college try, and it's a worthy endeavor. It's a much better buzzword than AGI, although it still uses the undefinable term intelligence within it, but that's not necessarily entirely a deal killer for being helpful. We'll come back to that. But this paper represents a renewed effort to be like, look, modeling what technology or machines or computers should do after what people can do, it really only goes so far. It's not going to get us to fulfill valuable, feasible capabilities in general. It's kind of self-indulgent, anthropocentric. What is that word?
Yeah.
And just like, and it definitely reflects like what the shift that I personally went through in 1991 in the summer between college and grad school, where I had already been interested in the concept of AI since I was a kid, but here I am graduating from college, and in college I'd mostly gotten all the sort of good old-fashioned AI type stuff from the 70s and 80s, and it's like, if we think about how we think and figure out logic, and we can program computers to do what we do, and how do we replicate ourselves and our own thought process or some abstraction thereof and all that kind of stuff. And I went on a summer trip with my family, and some of it was kind of on a boat, and we were just everyone in my family brought a book to read except for me, and I just brought a notebook and a pencil or a pen, and I wanted to figure out, I'm going to brainstorm, I'm going to figure out how the best way to do AI, right? I was like, I loved the concept of AI, right? At the time I was 22, and I was about to go into to Columbia to focus on AI for the PhD program. And I came to the conclusion that what people do is just very arcane, specific, specialized. It's a result of the way we evolved over millions of years in a very particular environment. So we have the very particular skills. The only way to replicate that, maybe the only way to replicate it would be to actually simulate all that evolution in all its gory details within the same exact environment, fully simulated, right? It's like, this is not feasible. And by the end of it, of this vacation, I've been like, you know what? It's supervised machine learning. So it's learning from examples where you already know the outcome. So supervised or semi-supervised, or at least labeled in the sense you already know the right answer. So there's some semantic problems there, because in this paper they espouse self-supervised learning, which would be like what large language models do, where you haven't explicitly gone out of the way to create labels, but you have the labels intrinsically. You already know the right answer. You know what word came next in this sentence, for example, right? But in any case, just the idea of having learning that was guided. And so that's what has always been my focus. And ever since then, in 1991, I've sort of been like, anytime people talk about the near-term arrival of AI in the spirit of the original concept of AI, which has been more recently rebranded as AGI, and then backpedaled a lot and made much more compromising definitions because people start sounding silly saying that it's going to happen, right? That whole mess. And so this paper represents here we are decades later, yet one more way of saying, hey, look, that whole AI concept, the whole enchilada, which more recently has been called AGI by many people, no, let's just get back to specializing or create a system, a framework, a technology or set of technologies that has the capacity to leverage amazing amounts of data that, is reflective of things that have happened in the past, and in particular human behavior, when we're talking about writing or what you see people do on videos or whatever, and learn from it in some way, capture patterns around that, and leverage that to be able to accomplish useful tasks, any of a really, really large range of tasks. That's basically what it's saying here, right? And it's trying to break it down to be a little bit more concrete, but the more it breaks it down, the more kind of cans of worms it kind of has to open. So like fill in useful things outside the human domain. Well, any and all things, and how many of these things is it going to be able to do, and how do we define what those are? And as they admit in the paper, what's the definition of utility?
Right, and that's one of the questions that you asked.
Yeah.
One of the authors, right?
Well, because they kind of give they give the definition I read, but earlier, like in the abstract of the paper, they list the same two things: exceed humans in any specific thing, and fill in the gap that humans can't do. And they phrase it a little differently, and the way they phrased it there, that kind of sounds like they're saying it should be able to do all the things that humans can't do, which is basically, if it can do the things humans can do and the things humans can't do, then it can do everything. Right. Including like predict who's going to click buy, lie, or die with 100% accuracy, right? So it's sort of, I asked that question just sort of like to get a reality check, but that's sort of just a technicality, the human, the English language, So I think that this is good, but the question is, what's the goal we're trying to solve by coming up with a new buzzword and defining it? What's the point? Are we defining what people do with computers? Are we defining a goal? Are we defining an existing technology? What do you think? Like, what problem are we trying to solve by writing or agreeing with a paper like this?
Well, I think this is a much more sober look at, I guess if we want to call it AI and where AI could go. I think this could be a framework and a point of reference for people that are in the field.
A framework, a point of reference as far as like what AI might be able to do, or perhaps more than that, just actually the goals of the field.
Right. And
but
sort
the
of
field, what's
it.
a field, right? A field isn't a reference to any particular technology. A field is, in the case of engineering, it's a group of humans trying to build something that has certain uses.
Right. Yes.
So it's about framing kind of the meta goals, right?
The meta goals, and to be able to steer it in an actually productive direction, as opposed to where we are right now.
Which is that we're steering it into
we're just throwing data and money and compute.
Well, but that's the goal.
Happens.
But that's success, right? I've been told
right?
that, if you get a really large investment as a startup, you could consider that a big success, right?
Right. Yeah,
and in a certain way it is, right? I mean, but yeah, as far as actually providing value, outside the subjective value of being excited about technology.
Yeah, no, but it's great to be excited. But it's also wonderful to be excited about something like this that's a little bit more concrete and grounded.
So
it's a philosophy.
So for those listening, let's repeat the phrase and everything, and we can come back to some of the specific points. But again, if you're not looking at it, you're trying to drill. Oh, it's a new buzzword. What are the words? Because there's so many different words you can combine. Superhuman Adaptable Intelligence, right? So adapting to exceed humans at a task humans can do. One task at a time is the implication. And adapt to tasks outside human domain. So not to be able to do all the things humans can do, and also some of the things humans can't do. Generally, it's about being able to adapt to particular specialized, I would say narrow. So it's kind of like, let's go back to narrow AI. But if you go back to narrow AI,
but also beyond, right?
But why are we calling it AI at all? Why are we using the word intelligence? And by the way, superhuman, I was thinking, well, they could have made this shorter. They could have, instead of superhuman adaptable intelligence, superhuman intelligence, isn't that the same thing as superintelligence? And then I realized, no, it's not, because superintelligence has come to mean something AI plus plus. Superintelligence has come to mean AGI plus plus. So it's you get to AGI, and then if it self-improves and it gets, not only is it capable of everything a human can do, but it's better than humans at everything or many things or what have you. And that's super intelligence. There's a famous book about the AI apocalypse written by a philosopher, super intelligence. So I think they're making sure to not use the phrase super intelligence. So they're using superhuman intelligence. And then one more adjective is adaptable. So superhuman adaptable intelligence, superhuman, kind of like gender neutral Superman or Supergirl.
Right.
Why is it Superman and Supergirl? Shouldn't it be Superman and Superwoman?
I wish.
That's pretty wish. Yeah. You noticed that before. You did notice. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm not so hot on the term itself, but it's kind of overshadowed by how much of a fan I am of the ideas that underlie the terminology. So terminology aside, it's as they put it, AGI is currently the North Star of the field that we're talking about. This provides the new North Star. And I'm really excited about that idea of creating something that's adaptable and actually learns.
Well, so interesting. So this is about trying to get people to sort of reorient and around something that's feasible but also valuable, and at the same time makes use of big data in the full sense that we have with Gen AI, that really being able to leverage on a new level and go beyond what's already done now. But to go narrow, and so there's this wonderful quote, and they even pulled it out. They put a little rectangle around it, and I'm like, I think they're asking us to tweet this quote, which I just did this morning. I tweeted it and I posted on LinkedIn, and here's the quote, because I'm like, if they want me to tweet this, I'll tweet it because it deserves it. the AI that folds our proteins should not be the AI that folds our laundry.
I love that.
So, exclamation mark. This is a research paper with an exclamation mark within it. So that is to say that you're not going to improve individual capabilities by working towards something that has general capabilities. For any given task, you're going to tend to do better if you just focus on specializing on that task. And so to kind of help understand that, they invoke what's called the bitter lesson, which is that approaches that scale with computational power tend to outperform ones based on domain knowledge. So the idea is that like domain knowledge, like human expertise in any particular domain, only goes so far. You can try to incorporate it explicitly with business rules, or that traditionally that's expert systems or whatever. So one way or another, you're trying to incorporate domain-specific knowledge held by humans into a system, but that's ultimately going to lose. The best chess player is a machine that can search, throw computational power at it. So to the degree that the approach, the technology, the algorithm scales with computational power, it's going to beat, right? It's going to tend to beat any method that is based on domain knowledge. So they bring that up and they're like, be that as it may, that's not the same thing as saying that specialization has no value. As scaling progresses, this is now a quote, as scaling progresses, we will need to know less about proteins to build a system that does protein folding. However, such a system still benefits from focusing specifically on proteins. I don't know much about protein folding, but I'm sure that it doesn't have a lot of overlap with laundry folding.
Right, and the next point about, the fact that we're always facing limited resources. Why not direct those resources towards the actual goal at hand, as opposed to let's just make something that's good at everything? It's
right. So that's the weird thing, is that at the same time we're striking this tricky balance, because certainly the advent of generative AI and its new types of capabilities that it offers by way of leveraging the mass learning data, training data that is known as all the written word ever, the whole internet and Wikipedia articles and all the books written and everything, leveraging that and then creating these new capabilities, generative AI, large language models, multimodal large language models. That whole thing is exciting because it has generality.
Yeah.
And along those lines, the paper espouses, in general, it says it espouses self-supervised learning, which is what Gen AI is finally doing pretty well at for the first time in history. That is to say, it's using data that's unlabeled, or at least not manually labeled, right? It is on a certain level supervised learning, but so there's a semantic problem with supervised versus unsupervised learning. Right, so unsupervised learning can just mean clustering, but that's not what Gen AI. That's not what transformers do. Transformers, the particular neural network architecture that makes use of cases where you know the outcome already. So if you know the outcome already, I've always called that supervised, but people also use unsupervised or self-supervised as a way to say, hey, look, we have a massive amount of examples from which to learn, and it didn't require any additional manual labeling. Right. Of course, it was manual if it was written by people, right? But that's just the human race doing its thing. We didn't have to put any extra, right? But then, what about, let's say, churn modeling? Your like one of the typical machine learning use cases in business, which is predicting who's going to churn, which customer is going to cancel, quit, or leave. You don't have to do manual labeling for that, for example, right? You just, history speaks. You know who did, and you learn from those cases of people who did or didn't unsubscribe or whatever it is you're trying to predict. Is that supervised? Is that self-supervised? So there's a little bit of a problem here with defining exactly. But let's assume that they mean no required additional manual labeling and a huge amount of data from which to learn, such as all the written word. So then what's being encapsulated And they're saying, look, let's not just be married to the transformer architecture that's gotten us so far recently. Maybe there's other architectures. There's not one, right? There's a famous thing in machine learning. This has been around for decades called the no free lunch theorem, which is that there's no one learning method that's going to always be the best. And certainly, but if you're leveraging the same basic data set, what you're doing is the computer's being trained on how to predict what should the next word or token be. And so that is to say, what's the actual thing that you're optimizing? You're optimizing the machine's ability to write like a human, to create should the next word be, and then the next word after that, etc. Write like a human has some business utility, but the reason there's so much excitement about it and such a wide range of feasible and then questionable potential uses for it is that it's so seemingly human-like. You can basically converse with it just by virtue of that capability, what we call conversational AI. And then it seems to be able to understand things about the world and make certain logical deductions to some degree. It also makes plenty of mistakes, but it's very tantalizing, and it seems quote unquote intelligent, or to have the certain amount of quote unquote human understanding to some degree, and that's the tantalizing thing. So how do we have our cake and eat it too with regard to the correction that a paper like this is meant to take, which is to be like, hey, look, don't get too excited about full-on generality and uber super duper pooper scooper intelligence. Instead, we gotta go back to the idea of solving one problem at a time, but in a new way, because now we're leveraging something that does have certain generality, but we're not defining exactly how general it is. So what problem are we, again, what's the big problem, the sociological problem we're solving? And for me, the sociological problem is hype, over-promising, misleading the general public, and then
I
many
think
of us.
this helps address it.
It helps, but it still leaves it open. It still
does.
uses the word intelligence.
Again, I'm not hung up on the terminology. I'm okay with the terminology because everything else is so exciting yet so grounded at the same time. It's rare to read something that happens to strike that balance. Yeah.
Right. No, this all clearly everyone involved writing this paper has their head on their shoulders from my perspective, not only as far as expertise, there's plenty of experts who also buy into the hype, and as far as Yann LeCun in particular, right, the ticket to this paper, I see that it's already got a bunch of press coverage and such, although I guess it's been 2 or 3 weeks maybe since they dropped it, but is his fame and his notoriety. He's so famous, and there's not that many machine learning subject matter experts, technical experts, who are that famous. There's like 5 or 6 or 7 or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And more than half of those kind of buy into the AGI hype for sure. Not all of them. Andrew Ng mostly doesn't, but he's the person who coined the term agentic, which tends to allude to that. But again, as I mentioned 2 episodes ago, I'm not religiously against the word intelligence. What I'm concerned about is the sociological phenomenology. Wow. We should write a poem about sociological phenomenology because it's got the right number of syllables. But just that, like, people are just going to always, and that's why the term was unfortunately coined in the 50s. Everyone talks about this history with reverence except for me and a couple other people. But I think that it was the beginning of a general misunderstanding. The coining of the term AI in the 50s at that Dartmouth event, because there just tends to be, even amongst technical experts, there tends to be this feeling, this thing of like it's going to reach a tipping point, the singularity, a certain critical mass of quote unquote intelligence, as if that's a singular thing on one dimension. And then once it gets past that, it's like a runaway train. It can self-improve. It's just sort of somehow you've gotten this, there's some core little magic bullet of general reasoning, which is really just another word for intelligence, right? But there's some core like capability, and then it's just automatically super general, and humans have it. And then of course anything a human can do, anything a machine can do as well as a human, it's going to do better than a human, because it will, at least as technology advances, it'll be able to do it faster. It'll definitely be able to do it cheaper. You'll be able to have a farm of computers doing, so there's not really a difference between human equivalent and superhuman once you get it on a computer. But anyway, there's that. So that's the thing is like, I see this as the main problem is that people tend to believe, as I did until the age of 22 when I sort of had that little breakthrough, oh no, you're not going to just sort of figure out the core of quote unquote intelligence or the core of quote unquote human reasoning and then let it rip. No, that's not a thing, right? But people tend to believe, and it very quickly kind of becomes a religious belief inherently, especially because it has that capacity to reach the tipping point, singularity, and self-escalate. It becomes kind of a religious belief, but this idea that if we could figure out the algorithm for that core thing and then it just takes off. And that's my concern, is that as much as I love this paper, the exercise taken, how well written it is, the ideas, the judicious shift to terminology, the ideas it espouses, I just don't know if coining another term that has the word intelligence in it is going to do much against that problem that's going to always haunt AI as a field.
Right. I mean, you're saying that this could just be a different flavor of Kool-Aid for the masses.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's a new flavor of Kool-Aid.
Right.
Yeah, but it's definitely better Kool-Aid, right? It's like sugar-free, and it's organic Kool-Aid, and it has vitamins.
Pasture-raised Kool-Aid. Fortified, yeah.
It has no bad food coloring, It's definitely not red.
That was colored by beets.
It doesn't have a mascot who jumps through walls.
He's a giant beet.
He's a giant beet. Hey. He's a beet, but he still destroys property by jumping through walls.
But then he fixes it.
Hey, kids, now it's superhuman. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. And I think the only part of the term that I'm not concerned about is the adaptable part, which is the part that I'm really excited about. The adaptability.
Yeah. Well, and they say, look, the critical thing is how quickly for any given problem it can adapt. And that's a measurable metric, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, that's something to work on. That's a goal, is to decrease the time it takes for it to become good at any particular task. And that sounds great, that what I just said, that sounds, summarizing a message of the paper. That's a great message, I think. The idea that self-supervised, as I think they intend it, is key. But the whole endeavor of let's use models that scale well over huge amounts of self-supervised data, if you want to call it that, big data, all the written word, all the videos, whatever exists. Let's leverage that well to solve lots of problems. So what I just said sounds... It is what we're talking about, right? Did you notice that I didn't use the word intelligence in there at all?
It's a super problem solver.
Super duper super. So super can be the new superlative, right?
It doesn't have to be superhuman, just
super awesome.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be superhuman; it just has to be super awesome.
Super awesome.
Super awesome
problem solver.
Technology. Super awesome. SAP. Superhuman.
Super awesome.
Super awesome technology. SAP. Okay, SAT. It's a SAT. SAT. Super awesome technology.
Nobody likes SATs.
I'm sure you did really well in the SATs.
I did really well on the PSATs.
And then by the time the SATs happened, you were partying too much?
Yeah, pretty much. I was over it. No, I did all right. Things worked out.
I did better on the GREs.
Oh, yeah,
so I was always unbalanced. My math was always good, really high, and then my verbal was like not what I thought it should be because I'm like, I'm smart.
Yeah.
But I wasn't. But my verbal continued to get better until, now, and I'm 57. So I was, but with the GREs, I was a little older, so I was a little more balanced.
Yeah.
And it was my best performance, and but I was late. So I was sliding through the hallways, running at, I think, UMass Amherst. And I sprained my ankle. I fell, I sprained my ankle. I actually had like a little injury. I ran into the room, and the administrator was like, "You're late, but I'm going to let you sit over here and I'm going to help you do it anyway." And I had so much adrenaline, and I think I also had to go to the bathroom. And I had so much adrenaline. That's what made me super awesome. Superhuman.
That's what we need to engineer.
That's That's how we should raise our kids.
Yes.
When it's time to take standardized tests. Anyway, are we still on topic? Does that count as
SATs?
So, I mean, before we wrap up, I was just thinking about kind of going back to something I started to allude to, and I want to bounce this off you. The idea that if you do self-supervised, which implicitly means you're using this huge amount of data of observed things that happened. This word was written next. This movement happened in this video next. Whatever you're learning from, or just even static images, right? These pixels were configured in this way, whatever it is. You're learning from this incredible amount of data to do something, but what you're learning isn't directly solving the problem, right? In most cases, right? So you're learning what word should I write, or token to be technically correct, should it write next? But that's the problem you want to solve, is to answer a question, right? Or get information from it, use it as a sidekick or a co-pilot to deliberate decisions. And
you're building the answer as opposed to
building the solution. You mean you're building components that somehow are going to help with a wide variety of problem solving, which is it's like traditional sort of longer term uses of machine learning, which we now call predictive AI or predictive analytics, right? In that case, you're training it to predict something, and the thing that you train it to predict, the thing for which you're optimizing its ability to predict whether you'll click, buy, lie, or die, commit an act of fraud or whatever, is directly used, right? Yeah. I mean, your goal may not be, the business goal is not to predict who's going to buy or which transaction is fraud. The business goal is to target something you would do about it. But still, it's a sub goal. It's a sub business goal because it directly helps you solve the problem. You know which transactions to block or audit because they're predicted as more likely to turn out to be fraudulent. You know which customers to offer a discount to retain them because you know they're more likely than average to cancel. So it has this direct, whereas the more general endeavor that today under generative AI, or as which is basically the use of self-supervised learning, is to create something that creates media, either writing, graphics, sound, video, right? By leveraging those large amounts of data that did not need manual. But then what it does is it's sort of like we cross our fingers. We're like, well, this it seems smart, right? It should be useful. And definitely with the human in the loop, the typical conversational AI, use it as a co-pilot, and you're intrinsically the human in the loop all the time, and you can call BS on it because you see it says weird, crazy stuff, and you're right there, right? And so you get you take the good with the bad, and there's plenty of good, and it kind of helps you figure out how to talk to your kid about whatever, or how to write a new PowerPoint for your new presentation, whatever it does, right? But the more general uses, right, where it's and I don't like to use the word agentic, it's a whole can of worms, but one of the main potential use cases would be it can serve as a customer service agent, right? Or an analyst. You ask it to do data analysis, you ask it to run a predictive AI project on its own. It helps with education. It's sort of your all-capable ultimate virtual assistant, right? All those kinds of things where it's supposed to achieve autonomy, and it seems to do really well on a lot of canned examples or in demos, right? that's another sort of big practical. Forget philosophy, forget the word intelligent for a moment and the problems with that. There's also a problem of just our expectations that if we continue down this line of leveraging large amounts of data, which we now know can be leveraged much better than ever, with currently the leading is the the neural network architecture. What's it called? The transformer. Yeah. But whatever, right? Still, there's this general expectation that it's going to become human level on those types of independent or autonomous roles. So that's another way, even without the word intelligence, that's another way that that's another sort of, or maybe the major problem with hype today that's not addressed, or I fear will not be successfully addressed by this paper.
What was that again? The last part?
I fear that this major problem with today's hype, the expectation that it'll become autonomous at those types of tasks,
is not being
addressed by the endeavor of this paper.
It's not, no. I agree with you. I agree with you 100%.
Okay, but so it doesn't solve that problem, hype problem we have today, but does it help address it at all? I mean,
I think it helps steer the individuals working or perhaps funding the industry in a more productive direction. But I agree. There's the Kool-Aid problem is it doesn't address the Kool-Aid problem as we discussed.
Does it perchance potentially exacerbate that by saying, here's the best new term, superhuman adaptable intelligence? All three of those words sound hypey in isolation.
Adaptable doesn't.
Well,
I like adaptable. I love it. No, I agree with you. I don't think it exacerbates it because it's just terminology, and I feel like the content behind the terminology is fairly grounded.
Yes.
And
yes. Right. I mean, how many people are going to really read this whole paper like we did? I mean, especially if they're non-technical and they're not used to reading research paper. I remember it took me like 3 years in grad school before I realized how to read a research paper. You know, it's like, it's very, the wording is not nearly as friendly as the way we're talking on this podcast. You know what I mean? Like,
but that's why these podcasts exist.
Yeah, but we're also right. But let's admit it. Like, anyone who listens to this podcast and does not read the paper is just getting the headline, right? Like, there's a lot of innuendo and carefully phrased paragraphs that we're not even touching upon, right? I mean, it's. There's a reason it's not just a paragraph, but it's a whole paper. So before we wrap up, let me ask the ultimate philosophical, or it's both practical and philosophical, but the ultimate question of I'm saying, look, we have a hype problem, but to what degree do we have a hype problem? That is to say, to what degree are you and I certain that it won't achieve these levels of great capability that seems to be so often either explicit or implicit in the international discourse? So that is to say, what could self-supervised learning do? And although the learning algorithm, the machine learning methods, can change and may be better for certain purposes than others and may improve greatly, the main bottleneck is the data. Even when you go to self-supervised, you've got all the written words in the history of human language. You've got all the video on YouTube, which is whatever, 1 million years of video or whatever it is. So how much can be learned, right? So, it turns out that a fair amount of the human mind can be reverse engineered by predicting what word or token should come next, right? And that's sort of been a largely, to many of us, a very surprising outcome. Like, It's very seemingly human-like. It can clearly answer a lot of questions correctly. my position has always been that the difference between what this uncanny, seemingly human-like technology can do and what humans can do is only going to become increasingly clear, and that, we're going to reach a ceiling. How much can be reverse engineered? A lot, but there's going to be a limit. We're not dissecting every neuron in anybody's brain. We're not learning from every behavior choice on minutia granularity of every human and with the knowledge of exactly the context in which they moved their pinky, right? So it's this very limited but rich set of observed human behavior. What word was written next? How much can be reverse engineered from that? A lot, an impressive amount. It's really cool. It's very clearly valuable some ways, but there's a limit.
There's a limit,
right?
yeah.
But on the other hand, we've only scratched the surface with how much it could learn from video, right? Or all the video, right? Of all the sensors in the world, right? And all of that is observing sequences of events, right? So, there's no scientific answer to describing exactly what the limit is. Without simulating every neuron in a human's brain, right? In terms of the generality. But, my feeling is that, there's very much diminishing returns. We're seeing that now, and that what we've created is not explicitly built to replicate humans, and the only feasible way to replicate a human would be just to fully simulate the evolution that caused humans, or one neuron at a time kind of simulation.
Right. Do the authors agree that there is a limit?
Well, they don't address that in this paper.
Yeah.
They're just like, let's keep doing self-supervised learning, and don't be married to one machine learning method like the transformer, and let's have as an objective the ability to adapt to particular tasks, one task at a time. So it's narrow. Any given endeavor or project has a narrowness to it. So it's just a general philosophy, right?
But the author didn't address that specifically when you asked the question about everything that humans can do and everything that humans...
that was more
me
me asking a clarification question, but I can read it here.
Yeah.
I said... So I was referring to the way they define it in the abstract. The phrase is a little different there. And it refers to being able to accomplish, quote, the skill gaps where humans are incapable. The skill gaps, which made me kind of sound like it alluded to all the skills humans can't do.
And it sounds more technical than just, than the more philosophical, limits of human ability in general. Skill gaps.
Well, skill gaps where humans are incapable. It's just saying gaps, as in gaps within human skills, so the things that humans don't have a skill for. Mm-hmm. So any task that a human can't do it. And I said that sounds like it refers to any and all tasks. So does that mean it only? I'm rephrasing a little, but I said so. This means it only qualifies as superhuman adaptable intelligence if it could eventually do everything. What am I missing? I've only read the full paper once so far. Mm-hmm. And then he responded last night, due to limited time and energy, no free lunch, that's the no free lunch theorem, it's not possible to perform great at everything. That's one of our main problems with the gene. So he and I it was sort of orthogonal. I mean, that's the thing about an email, or in this case social media. It's like it's not an interactive discussion. So he's kind of addressing, I didn't mean that. Well, I think he's kind of correcting something. What I phrase it as if there's going to be one technical solution known as superhuman adaptable intelligence. But that's not what it is.
Yeah.
This superhuman and that's what the other Q&A that or one of the other two that he answered is. This isn't meant to define any particular or prescribe any particular technology.
Right.
It's a goal for a field of technology.
Yep.
That is to say, a goal for a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's great. So, but I think that like the eschewing the endless narrative that AI is going to become like it becomes in science fiction, and it has that generality, and more recently we called it AGI. Like that sort of hype narrative that's always been there since the term AI was coined. Yann LeCun is one of the few famous people who kind of eschews that. And yet at the same time, here he is leaving Meta and starting a company and getting a bunch of investments. So that's interesting to me because most of the investments, like OpenAI's stated objective is like, we're going to make super intelligence and we're going to make it good, and safe or whatever. At least that I think it's still on their their mission statement. Right. So that gets a lot of investment. So for him to be starting a company and getting VCs, right? The VC frenzy, investment frenzy, the FOMO frenzy, right, is about this magic bullet, right? This panacea, that otherwise known as AGI, and just the awesome power of that concept, so seductive. So he's like, give me a lot of money, even though I'm not selling you the moon. I'm selling you something much more practical. And it's interesting because
but it's superhuman.
Probably, yeah, right. I mean, so that's the game. So that's
the game that you have to play.
Is that compromising the content, say, of this particular paper and the choice of the words in that? Like superhuman and intelligence, they're still in there.
Right.
So it's sort of like he gets his cake and eats it too. As an intellectual, as a researcher, as a thought leader, as an industry leader, he gets to be intellectually sound and not buy into a bunch of baloney. But he still lets people who aren't really getting into the weeds kind of still ride the hype train. I don't know, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. I mean, it's like only somebody that famous could do this and then still get investments in today's climate,
Right,
like,
right. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
The superhuman part helps.
So,
for sure.
And I think that the feedback on top of whatever generative AI can do, the hybrid stuff. So before we sign off, let's just give another pitch for the conference, which is Hybrid AI 2026, which is the topic, this edition of Machine Learning Week. It's May 5th through 6th in San Francisco. And very much so, we need to tame large language models. We need to put a reliability layer. We need to leverage the ability of machine learning to predict in order to deal with the otherwise untreated and untenable reliability problem that haunts large language models and generative AI in general, right? And one way that it's very much treated is reinforcement learning. Reinforcement learning from human feedback. But that only goes so far because that's typically just sort of general guardrails, right? So that it doesn't start saying things super offensive and right, you kind of get it in line to a certain degree. But for any one particular task, and so in that way, what I've been espousing with this idea of hybrid AI is very much aligned with this paper. It's like, let's solve one particular task at a time. So for this particular use case, this particular project that's going to leverage the unprecedented capabilities of a large language model, but do it in a way that's, doesn't cause problems too often and therefore is viable for launch and deployment, we need to put this reliability layer and we need to do it in a way that's very much specialized and tuned to the outcomes that matter for this particular system, project, problem-solving endeavor. So I'll leave it with that. Turns out lots of companies are doing this. You can check out the full program at machinelearningweek.com. And Luba is speaking at the conference as well. So any other thoughts before we sign off?
Nope. I think we covered it fairly thoroughly, but I'm excited to see any feedback that comes back on this episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I definitely agree with everything except maybe the use of the word intelligence. It just leaves me uneasy, right? But in terms of the content, and again, I'm not religiously against. It's just in the context of the way people hype AI. It leaves me concerned, but all of the points, the philosophy, the general research directions espoused by this paper, fantastic. I would love for this new buzzword, Superhuman Adaptable Intelligence, to take off. So that's our review of the paper. It's not going to be that often that we have a paper that has groundbreaking industry consequences worthy of our focus for the entirety of an episode, I think. So this, we'll see, but this might be one for the history books. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Data Show, and we will see you next time.